Since its inception, Toyota has prioritized the safety of forklift operators and pedestrians. Products like their proprietary Smart Environment Sensor Plus, aka Sense Plus, assist operators in identifying pedestrians or objects behind their forklifts. With features such as dynamic zoning, adjustable truck slowdown, and backward movement prevention, Toyota continues to showcase its innovative technology. Request a free demo by clicking the link in the show notes or head to toyotaforklift.com/sense-plus. That's SENS-PLUS to take the first step to making your operation safer today.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Ken Rohleder, and he is the president at IQpack. And we're going to talk a little bit about IQpack, Ken's background, and a little bit about his passion for taking the air out of the box and what that means, how that has an impact on your operation and your overall supply chain and business, and how to kind of root cause that, go back to what's the real problem there, and how that results in giving you some positive impacts, and how IQpack can help you with that. So, Ken, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very well.
Good to have you on here. I know that we've been talking a little bit back and forth about some of this stuff, so very excited to get you on the show here for an interview and just an overall discussion. So why don't you kind of give us some background on you and tell us a little bit about IQpack and what it is that you all do?
Sure. Well, a little background on me. I've been in the packaging, distribution, lean manufacturing space for all of my career, really. And I've known my business partner, John Moore, for 25 years. And we started a discussion many years ago, the beginning of this century, about we sell all this packaging, or there's so much packaging sold into this industry. And with e-commerce, the amount of waste is really appalling. And we decided that the last thing we do in our career, we want to try to fix that. And it's been a 20-year challenge for me. I was one of the founders of PackSize many years ago in North America when they rebranded in North America. I was one of the original owners. And it was a great company. It ought to be $1 billion company today. It's not their fault. It's been a very difficult industry to move the needle in manufacturing. It's a more mature industry. So manufacturing a lot longer than we've been distributing for e-commerce. So there is a core capability around dimensioning that just doesn't exist in the industry. And we're trying to build it. IQpack, it's really spun from a 9-year-old business that John started that was really logistics consulting and supply chain management consulting, mostly around the packaging business. And I came on board, I think 3 years ago now, as president to develop a strategy for how do we give customers advice and a managed service to get to the core problem of air in the box.
Yeah. And I think it is such it's, I love our industry, right? But at the same time, like you said, we have some of, the industry with some of the most waste out there.
It's understandable in a lot of ways. In manufacturing, you usually have the marketing people and brand people and engineers, and manufacturing, even distribution, is all in one facility or on one campus, and everybody's aware of what each other is doing. And I think in direct-to-consumer distribution, you have third parties who are doing the distribution. The brands who are paying the bill for the shipping and get the consequences of the packaging problems with customers, they're quite often in a different city. They're not even not even close to being in the same building. And
Right.
they're under the assumption that their partner knows how to do all this stuff. And in some cases they do, and they're not incentivized to do it. In other cases, they really just don't know how to do it. We can talk a little bit about the root cause of error and why the data matters around the dimensions on products, if you want.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that it's certainly a big challenge. And like you said, I think, sometimes, some of the stakeholders, like they're thinking maybe the other stakeholder is taking care of this or looking at this. And like you said, there are some, 3PLs out there or other parties that are very focused on this and realize the problem of that. But some maybe don't even necessarily realize the long-term problems, the overall additional costs that maybe are associated with some of these challenges. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, from your perspective and IQpack's perspective. I mean, the air in the box, right? I mean, why is that air in the box? I mean, why is that such a problem, and why is that such an important thing to have to focus on?
Yeah, well, the consequences of having fill rates is the inverse of air. So if you got 60% of your box is full of product, then 40% is void space or air. So 40% is airspace, 60% would be the fill rate. So they're inverse of each other. But fill rates in the e-commerce business are rarely better than 30% fill rates. So most e-commerce direct-to-consumer shippers are shipping 60% air. And most of them would guess they're shipping 15 to 25% air. And the reason it looks like 15 to 25% when it's really 60 is because the cubic inches grow exponentially or geometrically as you get to the outside of the box. So it is very deceiving. You really have to take two measurements, the measurement of the product and the measurement of the outbound box, and do the math to get to fill rate or the percent of air. UPS, starting in around 2012, I think, got very serious about dimensional freight costing with the DIM divisor and all that stuff. Surprising how many people don't really know how the DIM divisor works, but basically you're converting the weight and size of a product into a density, and you're paying essentially for a density. And FedEx or UPS is converting your cubic volume into a billable weight, which is the billable weight is just another way of expressing the cubic inches of the box. So the more the cubic inches, the more you pay. They just pretend like the box is heavier than it really is. And a lot of customers, if you're at 40% fill rate, 60% air, you're paying 20 to 25% more for UPS than you need to on average. And it can be a lot worse if that extra air in the box is sending you into like the oversized section of a sort at UPS or FedEx. Then there's penalties that are on top of that. There's penalties for manifesting incorrectly that are not necessarily seen on the invoice directly. You have to have the raw invoice in a database to upload that because the raw file is too big for Excel. So a lot of our clients didn't think they were paying a lot of things that at the end of the day they really were. And it's because they can't see it on the invoice. And that's probably bad design by UPS or FedEx. So the consequences from a cost standpoint are profound. It can be the savings from getting the box right can be as much as the total cost of operations. So if you save 25% on UPS and your freight cost is 4 times operations, which is typical, then you get the 25% out of the UPS bill. Operations are free. So companies are worried about the price of tape and the price of boxes and put stuff out for bid and all that. And none of that stuff is going to even begin to move the needle on the basis of cost for your distribution system. Getting air out of the box will absolutely move the needle.
Yeah.
So that's the consequences. Environmentally, if UPS and FedEx are shipping more air than product, in other words, it's more than 50% air, which I believe it is. Most people believe that it is. That means every 2 trucks going down the road should really be 1 truck. So the entire fleet is grossed up by a factor of 2. And the same is true for throughput in hubs and distribution facilities. Cubic volume throughput is a far better metric for capacity and throughput than number of orders, number of lines, weight. None of that stuff matters nearly as much as cubic volume throughput. And the industry hasn't started thinking that way yet. Some people have. There are some thought leaders out there who have started thinking that way. I talk to them on the phone occasionally, commiserate a little bit, I suppose. But I think that will be the metric that matters going forward, and that's the metric that we measure. Now, most companies don't have master data on dimensions for their product that is particularly accurate. So in the master data at the source of truth or the ERP level, each of the items that are in there, the products that are being sold that are in that master data, every transaction against that product has accounting and financial impact. So it's very difficult to go in there and change that data because finance has an interest in protecting it from the folks in the warehouse who might make an error and change a price or change something that would be accounting related, which would create a lot of problems. So fixing the data in the item master can be a bit of a problem or even an impossibility. So that's hurdle number one. Hurdle number two is the item master data will reflect the length, width, height, perhaps, of the last time an item was measured. But you never know from one order to the next whether the manufacturer has changed the size or you switch manufacturers and they have a different package they're using or a different case pack or that sort of thing.
Right.
That is at the core of it, the problem. Things are either profiled incorrectly to begin with, or the profile changes and it can't be edited in the master data. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such a widespread problem. I mean, certainly as you look at e-commerce and just the sheer volume of packages that move on a daily basis, hourly basis even, I mean, is massive, right? So you take that and you extrapolate that over all of those packages that are going out. I mean, it's just a massive impact, right? And I think it speaks volumes where you say, if you look at for every 2 trucks on the road should really maybe be 1, right? I mean, I think that's a huge impact to kind of visualize it. But, at the end of the day, as you mentioned there, I mean, that root cause on the master data side, right? And getting those dimensions in the beginning, I mean, it is such a key, not only for just from a packaging perspective, right? And taking that air out of the box, but just from an overall perspective within, the warehouse fulfillment center and operation overall, I think. And I'm curious, how do you, what would you say like in that regard? Because you mentioned that there's difficulty sometimes where, finance doesn't want you necessarily messing with the data. And I think that's fair in some regards, but it also, could be something that could be negatively impactful, as you've mentioned here too. I mean, what are some of the best practices around trying to set up better processes to be able to get that data right when it's coming in, instead of maybe realizing later that, hey, this is wrong, we need to make a fix, and then having all of these kind of challenges that you mentioned?
We'll be back after a quick break.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Do you want more warehouse content delivered to your inbox? Sign up for our new email series called Warehouse Wisdom Wednesday to get an educational series of emails on warehouse basics delivered directly to you every Wednesday morning. Find the sign up link in the show notes.
Yeah, so I spent many years implementing ERP systems, so I have kind of a baseline understanding of how ERP systems work in accounting and finance, and we knew pretty early on that was going to be a problem that had to be overcome. And there is a process for changing master data within an ERP environment, and it just requires a couple of checks and a firewall to be sure that we're not corrupting data in that system. So in terms of best practice, I'll say what we do. I think what we do is best practice is we use a sandbox database. So it's a sandbox that's not connected to any other system. And we're going to use that database to collect dimensional data. So when we collect dimensional data and drop it into our system, there's two huge advantages. Number one, we can use a little routine, a digital routine, so that it's scan and go, scan and go, scan and go, scan and go. You're not pulling an item up in an ERP or a WMS session and keystroking things. You're scanning a barcode and the scanner does the rest of it, drop the next item on there. So getting the data into the database is fast and simple. And it allows you to scan an entire warehouse at lightning speed, which usually, a 6 months to a year project, if you've got 10,000 items, we can finish in 30 days and show you how to do it, ongoing. So that's the first thing. Then in getting that data in some useful form to where you can improve your operation, what we do is download the current item master. So we'll have it separate from the ERP, but a clone of it in our sandbox. And then the algorithm will match our scan to the data that's in the upper level item master. Every time there's a delta that's outside the guardrails that we can set any tolerance for accuracy we want. But anytime there's an item that's outside of that envelope, that item will drop into a report. And so you'll have a report that has every item that is out of spec in the upper level item master. And then when that report is transmitted to the ERP team, to the IT people, finance people, what have you, we've scrubbed out any data in there that might be sensitive to them. So there will be no pricing data that's carried back over, not even descriptions. All we care about is UPC code number, length, width, height, weight. That's all we care about. So they're going to get a file, a report that's mapped to the ERP system. So our headers match their headers. They can open that up as a CSV file and look at it and say, yes, I know for sure I can upload this without affecting any financial data. And then when everybody agrees that, yes, this change is okay, you can hit the go button in 3 to 5 seconds. You've updated 20,000 items in an item master. It's very simple to do. And the same thing occurs with WMS. But you need that little sandbox piece in the middle that can do all the mapping and run the algorithms and find the problems that otherwise would be an analyst with a spreadsheet that just becomes absolutely overwhelming.
Yeah.
So we can understand why companies haven't been able to do it in the past, because there's not been a way practically to do it. We can understand why the finance would have problems with it. We can understand why a third-party logistics provider might say, hey guys, contract is signed, can't wait to open the new facility. You need your item master. So that they're getting all this cesspool of data from their customer who would prefer not to send bad data. But what are they going to do? What are they going to do about it? They're in a city where the products don't even exist.
Yeah.
So the 3PL they just take on the problem from the customer. And if your item, think about it, if you don't know the size of the items that are going to be in your warehouse by the unit of measure, so you know what the primary product size is, then the case pack, then even the pallet size of the cases coming in from the manufacturer or distributor. If you don't know all of that, you can't do directed put away because you don't know how big your work's going to be. You can guess, but if you guess, then you're doing directed put away and the warehouse is kind of in disarray. If somebody goes to a bay, put an item away and there's something already there, now you have an orphan. It's been put somewhere where it's not supposed to be. And that happens hundreds of times a day or a week. And before long, the warehouse is a disaster.
Yeah.
And then you can't get density in the warehouse because if you don't know how much room to allocate for things, there's a tendency to gross the size of everything up. And WMSs anticipate this to the point where they actually have a configuration in there where you can gross up the size of everything so that you don't shut your operation down. You just allow for too much room, and then the operation can continue. But the waste associated with that is obvious. And then going further downstream, cartonization. So every WMS system has a cartonization software, an algorithm that is absolutely adequate. It's just math. It's open source. MIT developed this back in 2018, I think, 2017. So cartonization is simple, but a great algorithm with bad data is pointless.
Yeah.
You're putting a high performance engine on your concrete speedboat at the end of the day. It really doesn't move.
I like that.
So if cartonization is wrong, there's a tendency to gross all of that up. Or even worse, I don't know what the percentage is, no way to really know. But I would guess somewhere between 75 to 90% of all WMS systems in 3PL distribution are measuring liquid cube. They're not even geometrically trying to cartonize. Consequently, you're sending a carton data down to the packer that's incorrect. And most of the time, it's incorrect to the large size because everything's been grossed up. Yeah. And the more items you put in a box, the more that error compounds. So it's growing geometrically and exponentially at the same time. And that's why you get a lot of orders that are 90% error. You get 3 small items in a box, and it's, the coffee cup and a refrigerator box thing. And that's because the error in the item master system has compounded. And packers don't really have the latitude to say, I disagree with the system, I'm going to use a different box, because they visually can't imagine when they open that box up whether it's going to fit or not. People can't memorize, the spatial characteristics of a 3-dimensional box. People can't do that on their own. And then the state of the art, so to speak, for the pick engine is to pick the box now. People don't want to handle items twice. So pick the tote is out of favor and pick the box is in favor. And you're picking to the wrong box. And the goal is to not handle things twice. Well, you end up handling things more than twice, 2, 3, 4 times. If you're picking to a box and it doesn't fit, or you pick to a box that's grossly oversized, flaps are in the way. There's just all kinds of problems associated with pick to box. So they weren't really considered. They were just unintended negative consequences when a lot of these systems were built. But if you get the item master data correct and reconfigure the cartonization software for geometric cartonization, your pick to box will perform the way it was designed to. Your directed put away will perform the way it was designed to. Cartonization will work the way it was supposed to, and you'll reduce the amount of error. And short of an on-demand system that is configured correctly, that's the best thing you can do. And you will save mountains of money if you just do that. There's so many aspects of an operation that require you to know how big the stuff is in the warehouse that the entire system just suddenly starts to work the way it was designed.
Yeah.
So there's just, aside from the freight savings, it's just really a component of operational excellence. It would be like a manufacturing company not having control over the drawings for machining parts and for assembling parts. The dimensions on those obviously have to be absolutely accurate, and you can have the same accuracy in your warehouse. So we fix it once, and we get a baseline where the data is correct. But then, as I said earlier, things change constantly. So you have to audit, and you have to be able to do an audit and check things to make sure that the items that matter are accurate. So what do I mean by items that matter? You're looking for this Pareto. So you can't profile 20,000 items every month to be sure everything's correct.
Right.
But once you have it correct one time, then you can take your sales order history for the month. You take the quantity sold times the cubic volume of one of those items. And those two items numbers multiplied together will give you the cubic volume throughput for that item. How many cubic foot of that item flow through my facility? So then you rank order that, and the top 7% of your SKUs in cubic volume throughput will represent half of your cubic volume every time, virtually every time. So the software will give a report once a month to operations and say, here are the items that you need to check. So the first time you're checking the top 7%, then the next month, it's dropping off everything that's already been checked, and it's getting the next 7%. So in the course of about a business, you've covered 80 or 90% of the item warehouse that matter. If you have an item that is so small, and the case packs are so small, et cetera, that and the volume is so small that it's one bay and or maybe it's always shipped as a single item,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not moving the needle on air, don't worry about fixing it. There may be other reasons to fix it, but freight costs, you want to focus on the items that are really driving costs, and it's not that many items. So the key is fix it once, and then you can identify the items that matter.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting. I think, underlying there, the whole thing, is, if you're putting that bad data in, you're going to get bad results out, right? I loved your analogy there, putting the performance engine on a concrete speedboat. I like that. It's pretty good. But I think it's so important to understand, just getting it right from the beginning can have such a positive impact flowing throughout the entire operation, all the way until it gets on the truck and ends up shipping, not only from a cost perspective, but from efficiency perspective, productivity perspective, and just an overall, like you mentioned, operational excellence perspective. I think it's very important for that. And now I'm curious, you mentioned in there because, I think as we see more and more e-commerce, right? A lot of e-commerce brands are just an idea that somebody had. They're not necessarily coming from people that have operational or supply chain backgrounds, right? So, understanding the importance of knowing dimensions, knowing weight, even having like proper SKU numbers and getting UPCs and all that stuff might be a little lost on them, right? So, as you mentioned, sometimes the 3PL in a sense would be kind of inheriting some of that lack of knowledge or lack of preparation in a sense. Could 3PL use IQpack as like a value add to their clients potentially? Is that something that they can utilize as a tool to be able to, add that value for their client, but then, also make their lives probably a little easier too?
Yeah, I think there's two things that a 3PL could do that we could help them with. When they're onboarding a new client, new customer, we can profile everything on the way in. And we'll put a couple of guys on site to just do it full time, or we can put one or two people and train the 3PL's crew. Usually it's the guys who are taking care of inventory are the one, because they're going up and down the aisles anyway, and they can do more than one thing at a time. So the onboarding process should go ahead and bake in good dimensional data management from day one. And then the second thing we can do is a customer who has some coordination between their 3PL and freight management. We can come in and fix an existing inventory, and it's not a big project. It's not difficult. It's not really even expensive, but we'll come in and fix it and then keep it fixed, as I said, with an audit report every month. We can come in and do the audit every month if a 3PL wanted us to. And the pitch to the customer is, the advantage to the customer is, you're going to see downstream freight savings, parcel savings. And then the next question always is, sensibly, how do we know? How do we know that?
Yeah.
Well, it's really easy to baseline freight. LTL and parcel freight, you take the cost on any, and take an invoice, put it in front of you on a desk, and look at what the total dollars was. And then you find what your actual weight shipped on that invoice is, and you divide one by the other. And what you want is the weighted average cost per pound of LTL, the weighted average cost per pound for parcel, and you track that over time. And we do that with software that is also measuring standard deviation and that sort of thing. So we can see whether there's a trend up or down in cost outside of what the normal wobble is, because of order mix and that sort of thing. So even after the fact, months after you implement, you can go back and get old invoices and a calculator and a pencil, and you can see month to month to month what the trend is. And I think if you fixed your item master data for a customer and you had access to transportation invoices and data, it would be an easy case for a 3PL to say, hey, we cleaned up your data and you're saving 15%, 20% on UPS. And I can prove that because, and here's the dollars. The percentage was 8% this month and we shipped this amount of volume. And so the savings were X dollars. And it's real money. It's perfect analytics. There's no guesswork. It's absolutely irrefutable, and it's super simple. You can do the same thing for LTL.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's fantastic. I mean, it's such a kind of I would say necessarily easy, but I mean, it's a fairly easy win to do something where you're going to have a positive impact on, not just the freight like we talked about in the beginning, but the multiple different aspects of the operation overall, and be able to drive that value, right? Which I think is just a big win overall. So, I mean, I think it's really, really interesting what you guys are doing with IQpack and the way you're looking at the problem. And I will say, like, the fact that you're able to do those audits and get that data corrected in a very fast way is certainly super appealing. I mean, I've been a part of projects where, we had 30,000 some SKUs and I will say, like, this too, for people that are listening. I mean, if you're looking to bring in any type of newer technology, automation, robotics and stuff like that, I mean, that data has to be right. I mean, I know we brought in a shuttle system. We didn't have updated dimensions. We didn't have all this stuff. And that created an entire other project with just a dedicated person every day for a couple months going through those 30,000 SKUs, trying to just cube scan and, get the dimensions right. So we could even just put product in the system that we purchased, because it wouldn't accept product if it didn't know the dimensions, because it couldn't say like how much could go in a tote or how much could be in a tote at any given time. So I mean, getting that correct is so important to be able to do if you're going to have any type of evolution or scaling within your business. I think it just makes total sense. So very, very interesting stuff with you here, Ken, and I really appreciate you coming on and giving us all these great insights around packaging and taking the air out of our boxes, right? We'll say, usually say take the air out of our sales, but in this case, it's a positive, right? We're taking the air out of our boxes, which is a great thing. So if people are interested in learning more about IQpack and investigating what you guys do a little further, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. You can always message me on LinkedIn just by my name. IQpackglobal.com is our website. There's a contact page there. But if you just ping me on LinkedIn, I'll get right back to you. I'm on there generally every day.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all those links so people can easily find them at thenewwarehouse.com as well. So, Ken, I want to thank you once again for joining me on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.